Welcome to this episode of Rewired Inspired. I am your host, Elena Petrescu, and today I have a very special guest. And my guest has been connecting to people on the other side almost his entire life. His name is Mark Anthony, JD, Psychic Explorer, also known as the Psychic Lawyer. He's a fourth generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He is an Oxford educated attorney licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. Mark was named a notable graduate by the Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science. He was designated Visionary of the Year by Best Holistic Life, Honoree of Spiritual Awakenings, International Circle of Honor honoree, and he received the OME Award for Best Psychic Medium. Mark appears nationwide on TV and radio, including CBS TV's The Doctors, Gaia TV, and Discovery Channel's Destinations of the Damned. He co-hosts and live-stream show The Psychic and the Dark on Transformation Network, voted Best Radio Show of the Year 2024 and 2025 by Best Holistic Life. This psychic explorer travels to mystical locations in remote corners of the world to examine ancient mysteries and supernatural phenomena. He is a featured speaker at conferences, expos, and universities, which include Brown, Columbia, Harvard, and Yale. Mark Anthony is the author of three best-selling books. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, has won multiple awards, ranked as one of the top books about faith, and was up for Felser Prize Award. His other best-selling books are Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. He is also a VIP executive contributor for Best Holistic Life magazine. Mark, a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elena. It is such an honor to be here on Rewired Inspired, and I thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted to have you here. Um, and I'd like to start with the story. Um, when did you first realize that you had this ability?
I first realized that I had psychic abilities when I was 3.5 years old. Now, I didn't say, oh, I have psychic abilities. What started happening, Elena, is I began to interact with my invisible friends. Now, that is not unusual for a toddler, for a very young child to do that. But both my parents could see who I was communicating with because both of them also were mediums. And this ability runs in my family. We've tracked it back in the 1890s, which would be 4 generations ago. And it probably goes even farther than that. And it was really interesting that when my father, he was an aerospace engineer, but before that, he was a U.S. Navy SEAL. So he was a real no nonsense, all about the facts and science, but he was born with these abilities and he had 4 siblings. One of his sisters had these abilities, as did his mother and his maternal grandmother. Then my mother was had huge psychic ability, as did her maternal grandmother, Giovanna, who had come to the United States from Italy. And Giovanna was known in the Italian American community of New York City, Little Italy, and North New Jersey as the woman who knows things. And so she had quite the reputation. And it's a funny story. My parents met at a dance. My dad just got out of the Navy, so here he is, this 22-year-old sailor, all full of himself, and he said, I love when they were telling me, he goes, I saw this foxy looking dame. He's talking about my mother. And my mother was only 19 years old, but he thought she was much older, like maybe she was 28 or 29 because she worked in retail in the fashion industry. And mom said, well, I got all the latest designer clothes for wholesale. So mom was dressed to the nines, and they were both really great dancers, ballroom dancers. And she was a nice Italian Catholic girl. So, they would meet at some dances. And after a couple dances, she said, before we go out anymore, you need to know something. She said, I see spirits. And my father responded as only a sailor could with some very choice language, followed by, I do too. And then they knew that the connection between them was more than just, oh, you're handsome, you're beautiful. And they were connected on this incredible level. I've got two older siblings, and they're very intuitive. I wasn't planned. I was a surprise. They had me a bit later, and then when I was 3.5 and I started seeing the spirits, Mom was like, "Oh, he's got it," and Dad was like, "Ah, geez, he's got it." So, that started everything.
Mm. What an interesting story. And tell me, Mark, what was it like for you growing up with parents that were psychic?
Well, it wasn't easy because they always knew what I was up to. And especially when you're a teenager, and teenage boys are always up to something. It doesn't mean necessarily bad, but I'd come home and so where were you? And I would give them the, oh, well, and they'd be like, no, you weren't. And I think every parent has that bit of sixth sense, but my parents took it to a much greater degree. The thing is, Elena, from a very young age, my father, I remember he sat me down and he said, don't talk about this to anyone. You can tell your mother and I anything you want, but people won't understand. And he was afraid because his sister had been treated really horribly in her life. It's a long story, but I know we have limited time, so people can
Yes.
read about what happened to her in my book, Evidence of Eternity. And he was afraid that something like that could happen to me. And then when I started school, I started Catholic school at age 5. And at first I thought, oh, they're talking about angels and saints and all these spirits. And then I started hearing the other things they were saying, and I decided, yeah, I guess Dad was right.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a drop in the bucket of what it was like growing up with psychic parents. They always knew what I was up to, and sometimes it actually saved our lives.
Mhm. Yeah, it was a little bit of a taboo subject at the time. Um, Now you went on and you became a lawyer, and that's pretty interesting, a psychic lawyer. And can you talk to us about how these two careers, as an attorney and a medium, did they ever conflict? Um,
Um, Actually, they complemented each other. Initially, Elena, I wanted to go into the clergy because as a young medium, I felt very drawn to the spiritual. But I found that going into the priesthood, while there was the spiritual appeal, there were so many rules and regulations, what you can't do, what you can't say, what this, and that. It just didn't resonate with me. And then I ended up going into law. So, it was like too many rules and regulations in the clergy, and I go into the very epitome of rules and regulations, which is the legal profession. Um, People think that being a psychic medium and an attorney are diametrically opposed. And I can understand that because, most people don't like lawyers. I get that. All right. Why? Why is that? It's because when you go to a lawyer, 99 times out of 100, the reason you're going to the lawyer is because something bad is going on in your life. You're getting sued, you got arrested, you've been injured, there's a breach of contract, there's problems that you have. And what lawyers do, despite the negative reputation that lawyers have, which in some cases is justified, but in most cases I don't believe that it is. Um, Lawyers help people get through some of the most difficult times of their lives. And I was a criminal defense attorney. Initially, I started as a prosecutor, and I had to work with victims of murder, of rape, of child molestation, as the advocate for the state of Florida to put the bad guys in prison. Then I went over to criminal defense, and then I went from there into personal injury and started working with head injury, brain damage cases. So I had to learn about anatomy and physiology. And both careers as a medium and a psychic are about helping people, because as a medium, I help people coping with the loss of a loved one by facilitating communication between the loved ones here and their loved ones in spirit. But both jobs depend on evidence. See, as a
Mm.
lawyer, you've got to have evidence to prove your case. And as a medium, you have to be able to produce evidence transmitted by a spirit which can validate and authenticate the validity of the spirit communication. I mean, everybody has a grandmother who loves them. Okay, oh, you have a grandmother that loves you. But when you start giving specific details about what she looked like, how she died, where she
Mm.
lived, her name, things like that. The other day I was doing a reading for somebody, and her father's brother came through who had passed, and I described how he died. And because people say, well, how do you get information? And I started hearing the song that Paul McCartney did after he left the Beatles. I started hearing, "We're so sorry, Uncle Albert. We're so sorry." And I'm hearing, "We're so sorry, Uncle Albert." And I've been doing this long enough, Elena, to where I know that you just say it no matter how weird it is. So I started singing a couple of that. And my client started laughing, and she goes, "Well, the spirit you're talking to was my Uncle Albert."
Oh my God.
It's like it doesn't get better than that.
Absolutely. Wow, that is so fascinating. Um, have you ever used your ability as a psychic medium in your work as an attorney? Because from what you described, it seems like yes, you combine, like you look at the evidence that you have, and then talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it's part of my skill set. It's part of who I am, and it would give me insights into people and into situations. And I had a reputation in the legal profession as being kind of weird. Other attorneys would say, "Watch out for that guy. You know, he knows things that he shouldn't." And in jury selection, see, when a case goes to trial and it goes in front of a jury, there's a process. It's a French term called voir dire, which in French means to speak the truth. And so you bring in a group of people that have been, summoned to be jurors, and the plaintiff or the prosecution gets to ask them a number of questions, and followed by then the defense. And the reason for that is to get the jurors to reveal any biases or prejudices that they may have, which could affect the outcome of the case. And then in most trials, it'll be six jurors with one alternate on cases like, murder cases, death penalty. You'll get 12 jurors and more than one alternate. And I seem to have keen insights in jury selection. And if you'll indulge me, I can give an example. I
Yes, please.
was acting as a criminal defense attorney, and my client, he was this big burly guy, and he'd been involved in a fight at a bar. And basically, my client beat up the victim, who was another big guy. So it was, big brute A beat up big brute B, and big brute B lost the fight, so he pressed charges. It's not unusual. These things happen all the time, barroom brawls, but it's a crime of violence. So during the jury selection, the prosecutor was asking questions, and I kept getting drawn to this one juror, and I'll just refer to her as juror number 9. Beautiful woman. She had this, I remember her with this beautiful olive complexion and dark eyes. And I kept getting drawn to her, and I kept feeling a female spirit around her, and I kept getting a tightening around my throat. So I knew that the female spirit died from some problem with breathing or her throat. So now it's my turn to ask questions in the with the objective of determining if there's any biases. And one of the standard questions that you ask is is has anyone on the jury or a family member of yours ever been the victim of a violent crime? And the reason I was asking that, because this was a crime of violence. I mean, it was two big guys, having a fist fight, but it's still a crime of violence. Well, lo and behold, Elena, this woman raises her hand. She's shaking. I'll never forget, the tears are streaming down her face. And she said, Mark, well, she didn't say Mark, but,
Yeah.
she said, sir, um, a year ago, my sister was in a foreign country and an escaped mental patient strangled her, dismembered her body, and threw her in a garbage can. Oh my God. And now I'm seeing her sister, and I realize, oh, this is it. Literally, I had one foot in both worlds, our side and the other side. And the thing is, in law school, they never taught us how to deal with this particular situation. And if the listeners want to find out what happened, you really need to get my book, Never Letting Go,
Good.
and you'll find out what happened.
Good. Never letting go.
Never Letting
That's
Go.
now, do you ever step into go somewhere and all of a sudden you get this message or you get drawn to a person because spirits wants to speak with you and pass on a message?
All the time. All the time. Um, there's one story I like to tell. I think it's kind of funny. I had to go to New York City. And so I was packing my suitcase and I knew it was going to be cold. And all of a sudden I started thinking, I need a new sweater and I need a purple turtleneck sweater. So I'm like, a purple turtleneck sweater. And I know there's this one store, it's the Men's Warehouse. So, hey, there's a plug for the Men's Warehouse because I know they sell sweaters that I like. So I thought, oh, what the heck? It's not very long. So I drove over there and there's one purple turtleneck sweater in my size. And I go, oh, and the salesperson, he comes up and he said, you want a purple turtleneck sweater? He goes, why? And then all of a sudden, I said, and I normally don't do this because I was there to buy a sweater. I said, did your mother pass recently?
Mhm.
And this big guy started shaking in the tears. And he said, yes. And I explained who I was, and he goes, I want to hear. I want to hear. And I got his mother to give him a message, and this guy was sobbing. And so what had happened there is his mother's spirit knew that her son was hurting. She knew that he needed this connection. So she sent me electromagnetic impulse, which goes into my brain, purple turtleneck sweater, this store, go now. And so sometimes things like that happen. Generally, I just don't walk up to people and fling readings at them because you don't want to cross a boundary. Some people may not be receptive. I mean, I've got a number of stories along these lines, but I think that's a pretty straightforward illustration of what had happened.
Did you end up buying the purple sweater?
I did. I did. In fact, I've worn it at several events. It's really nice. I need another one because it's starting to wear out now. But yeah, I have it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Um, well, I have so many questions. They're coming
No,
so
go
fast.
ahead. Go ahead. It's my
I know
honor
that
to be here.
you travel to so many paranormal places and mystical places, and I can see on your background you have all these beautiful um, things that you've probably collected. Talk to us about that, please. Because I know you seek evidence to explain the unknown.
It's been my life's passion, ancient mysteries. Stonehenge, Loch Ness, Machu Picchu, Chichen Itza, the Giza Plateau. I mean, you name it. If it's an ancient mystery, I am so enthralled with it. Just I want to find out about these things. And one of the most fascinating places that I've been, and there's so many. I mean, and what I mean is there's so many fascinating places in the world. Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu is in the Andes Mountains in Peru. And when the Spanish invaded in the 1530s to conquer it, they never conquered Machu Picchu. And the question is, well, what happened? And I think because of its remote location, it took years, for the Spanish to conquer Machu Picchu. But it's archaeologists are still studying it. And it was rediscovered, at least by Westerners, I think around, it's like, gosh, 1903, 1904, by a guy named Hiram Bingham. And he was affiliated with an American university. What he was in the Andes Mountains, and the local indigenous people said, "Oh yeah, you need to pull the vines off of here because there's a whole city there." So the locals knew what it was, and so he found this incredible city. And for people who love adventure and mystery and beauty, the sheer beauty of the place. And I've got several stories I can tell about it, but there's one in particular. It appears that Machu Picchu was inhabited primarily by women who were the priestesses to the sun god. Now, of course, there were men there, and the Inca, who was the emperor of the Incan Empire, they would go there for special occasions. What we've also discovered is that the Incas engaged in human sacrifice. And it appears that the people that were sacrificed were some of these priestesses who considered it an honor. Well, so there I am, and it's at the top of a mountain, and there's about a 5,000 foot drop, and there's this large stone table, and it is believed that that's where they performed some of the human sacrifices. So, and it's in Machu Picchu, it's at a 9,000 foot elevation. So the weather is changing constantly. It'll be raining, then it's misty, then
Yes.
it's sunny, and it's really cool. But be prepared to get wet because you're going to get wet. And so I had my camera and I'm trying to get a good picture. So I saw this structure. It was this stone structure. I'll call it a hut because it wasn't real big. In fact, it was probably about the size of this room that I'm in. And so I walked, it was a good maybe 100 feet, maybe about, 30 to 40 meters from the the
Sacrifice.
sacrificial altar, and I'm standing in the doorway of this hut, and I'm zeroing in with my telephoto lens, and then all of a sudden, Elena, I felt transported to another time. And along the path, I suddenly saw all these people, mostly men, dressed in these elaborate costumes with bird and animal heads and feathers and glittering jewelry. And all of a sudden, I realized I was seeing through the eyes of one of these sacrificial um, uh, victims. I don't want to call it a victim because I was overcome with this sense of honor that I was going to be
Oh,
sacrificed.
oh,
And then I
oh,
came out of it. And I remember going, oh my God. I mean, I was so physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually wiped out. I was not expecting this. I wasn't looking for this. It was just, and these things like this have happened to me at several archaeological sites around the world. But that one, I mean, I could see with the detail, the costumes were beautiful. It was this huge ceremony, and for a moment, I felt transported over 5 centuries back in time to witness what it did look like for one of these people.
no. I see in your background there a little, like a genie, little thing.
Yeah, the
Is
genie.
there the genie lamp? Is there a significant story behind that that you may want to share with us?
Well, it was funny because I've always been attracted to the story about Aladdin and the lamp. We all, come on, secretly, don't we all wish we would find that lamp and get 3 wishes? And I loved in the movie the one with Robin Williams when he comes out and goes, Okay, there's a couple of rules. No wishing for more wishes. Because everybody was like, my first wish, I want 500 wishes. Um, but I do a lot of research with near-death experiences, and I'm giving a presentation I gave this presentation at the International Association for Near-Death Studies in 2025, and I'll be giving it a similar one coming up this year. And the title of the presentation was Near-Death Experiences, an Ancient Mystery That Changed the World. And in my research, it appears that all the major religions have at their root base a near-death experience which affected and shaped it. And there is a story in India that occurred, we think, around 1500 BC, where this young man dies and he goes through a tunnel into the light, into the transcendent realm, and he is told he could have these wishes before
Mm.
he returned. And it's my belief that this near death experience may have been the basis for the story of Aladdin. Because in the experience, he talks about a light. I believe he references a lamp. So I'm doing more research on that one. Um, and Professor Gregory Shushin has done research on this as well. So that's so when I saw that genie lamp, I just had to have it.
Well, a question for you is, how is the afterlife frequency different from other? Because you wrote this book, The Afterlife Frequency, which I believe is not your recent one, but it's one of them. Talk to us about the difference from other books of mediums.
The afterlife frequency is different from books by other mediums because it provides a scientific basis, not just for mediumship and the existence of the afterlife, but all forms of spirit communication, whether it's contact in a dream, whether it's a near death experience, a shared death experience, deathbed visions, out of body experiences, reincarnation. Because what I do here is I'm redefining mediumship and taking it out of the antiquated Victorian era understanding. You see, it was in the age of spiritualism, which was pretty much in the mid to 19th century, right up to about the 1930s, but particularly during the Victorian era. And it wasn't just in England, it was in the US and in France, and all over Europe. And that's where like the French terms clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, the French were very much involved. But the problem, as I see it, is that the understanding of spirit communication is anchored in a Victorian era understanding, and the terminology is very antiquated. So I brought it into the 21st century, and I refer to spirit communication as interdimensional communication because that's what we're doing, Elena. Here we are in the material world dimension, and we're communicating with another dimension. I developed the
Yes.
term the electromagnetic soul to explain what we really are, which is a soul, a spirit, consciousness for people in the realm of psychology and science. What we really are is pure consciousness, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. In other words, our brain didn't create the soul, it's more like a computer hard drive that hosts the soul. And
Mm.
that coincides with faith because every belief system teaches that our soul pre-exists the body, comes into the body, then moves on after the body dies. So the electromagnetic soul theory, which has been endorsed by a number of scientists and physicists, it provides the basis for all forms of spirit communication.
Mhm. Well, your most recent book is called The Afterlife, no, The Evidence of Eternity.
No, the afterlife frequencies, the most recent evidence of
Yeah, yeah,
eternity is the one before that. And then
that's right.
that
So,
that yeah, evidence of eternity also introduces quite a bit of science. What I found is, and I'm not for 1 second saying anything derogatory or negative about my colleagues and our mediums. I mean, I know all these people and I love them as friends and colleagues, but they tend to, once again, they're still rooted in the Victorian era understanding. Now, I'm a lawyer. I understand anatomy, physiology. I've got a background in quantum physics, history, archaeology, and I tie all of this together to provide rational, logical understanding for spirit communication. And I did that in my book, Evidence of Eternity, and it was so well received. People started contacting me and saying, "We want more science." And so that's what led me to write The Afterlife Frequency. But disclaimer for everyone listening, when you read my books, I know I talk about science and quantum physics. Please do not expect a dry read. It's not going to be like reading an algebra textbook. Okay, yes, I explain science, but I want you to be engaged, entertained, and educated. And so they're illustrated by some really driving stories. Some are pretty intense, some are actually funny. But the thing is, it's important for people to understand that there is a logical, scientific explanation for everything, even the spiritual. And if we can't explain something now, it's simply because our technology is not yet advanced enough. But science is not static, it's always changing, and we're making new discoveries all the time, which is validating the EMS, electromagnetic soul theory, and that there is an afterlife and spirit communication is possible.
Mm. In your book, The Afterlife Frequency, you explain the different forms of contact with spirit, such as through a medium like you, or a dream state, or that bad vision. Um, is there a common denominator between all of these different forms of spirit contact?
Absolutely. It's all based on my EMS, electromagnetic soul theory. So let me explain. When we die, think of our soul as a drop of water. So your EMS, electromagnetic soul, is a drop of water, leaves that body and plunges into the eternal sea of consciousness that I refer to as the collective consciousness. You're still an individual, but now you're a coherent quantum electromagnetic field, and now you're interconnected with other spirits, and so on and so forth. We know that our brain has five main frequencies. Now, even though the brain did not create consciousness, it's still the control center for our physical, body and our ability to physically perceive things. Spiritual perception, that's another matter entirely. And so there's five brainwave frequencies. There's gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta. And gamma, you're really high functioning, so you're doing
Yeah,
calculus homework, Beta, state we're in now, activities of
yeah,
daily living. Then there's alpha, which is that relaxed, groovy,
yeah.
Southern California groovy baby state. And then we got theta, deep dreamful sleep. And then delta, which very low brainwave activity, but that's where your body regenerates and heals. All of these can be measured through electroencephalogram and quantitative electroencephalogram, EEG and QEEG. Then we can determine their frequency, which is measured by hertz. It is on the alpha theta border, 8 hertz, where psychic and mediumistic activity occur. So, when you're sleeping, you go from beta to alpha theta and you get to that 8
Yeah.
frequency, 8 hertz, 8 hertz frequency on the alpha theta border. So here you are in the sleep state. Spirits are able to perceive that. They adjust their frequency. Voila.
Mm.
You get the spirit
Okay.
communication. And it's interesting because people will accept contact with spirits in a dream more than they will mediumship.
Mediumship.
And even in scripture, there's several incidents throughout Old Testament and New Testament scripture of people communicating with angels and other entities in the sleep state. Well, the EMS theory also explains mediumship, which is the same thing. It's just that for some reason, people like me can achieve that alpha theta border in the awake state. We're still studying that. This explains deathbed visions. Deathbed visions are where somebody is dying. They're in the transitional phase and they will see the spirits of loved ones around them. Now, the deathbed vision will overlap with what we call an SDE, a shared death experience, because talk to anyone that works at hospice. Okay, so hospice workers or regular healthcare workers, close family members and friends who've been around someone's transitioning, and that person may start saying, "Oh, there's Aunt Martha, there's a cousin Charlie who passed." And many times, people in close proximity will see these entities as well. Once again, this is something I write about extensively, and it has to do with when somebody's transitioning, their electromagnetic soul, it's expanding, it's getting ready to leave the body. Well, that EM frequency starts affecting the frequencies of the people around them.
Right.
I wrote a story for Best Holistic Life magazine in the January 2026 edition called The Shining Light Spirit of Wild Horse Pass. And I tell the story of a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Louise, and her mother, Gloria, really good friends of mine. I just love them. And they're of Native American descent. And Louise is actually a rocket scientist. Okay, I live
Oh,
near
wow.
Kennedy Space Center, and a lot of my friends are because of my interest in science and space and technology. So a lot of my friends are rocket scientists, and and her mother, they're of the Chippewa nation, and her mother was terminally ill, and the hospice worker came to visit them, and the hospice worker said, "Well, just so that you understand, many times when people are transitioning, they will claim to see spirits." And Louise said, "We're Native American. Of course we see spirits." And I love that she said that. Well, it gets even better, Elena, because all with electromagnetic soul. So, why is this the shining light spirit of Wild Horse Pass? Okay. Well, Gloria transitioned. Gloria died, and Louise very dear to me, and I made some connections with Gloria's spirit after she passed. But a couple months later, I was at Wild Horse Pass outside of Phoenix, and I was one of the keynote speakers at the Helping Parents Heal. And for anyone who's lost a child, please go to helpingparentsheal.org. Beautiful nonprofit organization dedicated to helping parents who've lost a child. And a friend of mine was given a presentation. He did a guided meditation. His name is also Mark, Dr. Mark Pitstick, and his life partner Andy. She's another medium, and he finished. And I said, "Hey, Mark and Andy, do you want to go to lunch with my manager Rocky and I?" And they said no, they couldn't. They had something to do. Then all of a sudden, Andy goes, "You know, I think I'm going to go to lunch with you and Rocky." So we're sitting out by the pool, and it's we're in the desert, but we're under a pergola, and there's misters and all this. And I told Andy that story about Louise and the hospice worker, and she said, "Well, we're Native American, of course we see spirits." And I go, "I just really miss her mother, Gloria." And Andy goes, "What did you say?" She goes, "Oh my God, during the guided meditation that Mark, the other Mark did, she said this female spirit came to me and said, 'I'm Gloria.'" And Andy said in my meditation, I go, "But I don't know who you are." And she goes, "But you will." And then I realized this is a term that I introduced in Evidence of Eternity and the Afterlife frequency known as spiritual synchronicity. And spiritual synchronicity occurs when a spirit will maneuver people into a
Into it.
particular position. And so I immediately whipped out my cell phone, called Louise. She answered. I go, "Louise, you've got to hear this." And Louise was laughing and talking, and it was just the most beautiful example of how spirits are not here to control us or to do anything negative, but they can guide us, plant suggestions, and I knew Gloria. That was so Gloria. She wanted all of us to get together, come through somebody who had no idea who she was, so we could give the message to her daughter Louise. And Wild Horse Pass is on Native American land. I
Wow.
mean, Elena, it's such a beautiful example of the healing power of spirit communication, and that when our loved ones die, our relationship may end in the physical sense, but it
Yes.
continues on in the spiritual sense.
Yes. I truly believe that, Mark, because when my mother passed away, I couldn't get over it. And she came to me in a dream and she literally said, I am fine where I am. You need to move on with your life. And the following day, I was able to be a normal person again. So, and I do also believe that, yes, when spirit is ready to go, they do have this communication. My mother kept saying, well, if I pass away, are you gonna get over it? He kept, and then say, why would you talk like that? Like you're still young. Mark, it's been such a pleasure having you on my show. I know you're a busy man. Where can people go to find more about you? Is it afterlifefrequency.com?
Yes, afterlifefrequency.com. I invite all of you to visit there, and I invite you to sign up for my newsletter because that way it'll keep you up to date on where I'm going to be. I'll be traveling quite a bit later this year in 2026. You'll find out also about how to sign up for readings, about my books, and about my weekly live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc. And every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and all times in between and either side. My co-host, Dr. Pat Basili, is a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. And so we take calls from listeners, and I'll make connections for people. And Dr. Pat helps people understand the metaphors, the full extent of the messages, and she does such tremendous healing work. And you can find out about all of that at afterlifefrequency.com, just like my latest book, The Afterlife Frequency.
It has been a pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you,
Thank you
Elena. God
so
bless you.
much.